Hello and happy new year, everybody. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Joseph Morris, a true crime case discussion channel. So if that's for you, please hit the subscribe button below, ring the bell so you never miss a live, and hang out with me and my co-host right here, Miss Gabby, who's all snuggled up. It's a bit cold in my studio today, but we're hanging in, we're just chilling out, and we're gonna discuss none other than Prince Andrew and his upcoming trial. So I did a couple videos actually this past week. The first one was about Ghislaine Maxwell, and the next one is about Prince Andrew exposed. And honestly, I'm looking back at that video and I'm like, I did not do that great of a job because I missed some of his scandals. And over the years, he's been called Air Miles Andy because of his huge spending problem where he used to like fly helicopters instead of taking trains, was always partying as well. So he also had the name Randy Andy. And lastly, this one's kind of relevant, but he was also called Handy Andy. And this is in the most recent developments of the case. So this guy, he's plagued with scandal. He's brought so much shame and disgrace to the royal family. And I mean, my last video was just a tip of the iceberg, but this one is a bombshell that I've just discovered is on his daughter's 18th birthday, held on the grounds of Windsor Castle in 2006. This picture was taken. And it's completely disturbing because the event was with Jeffrey Epstein, of course, Ghislaine Maxwell, and then Harvey Weinstein. So my title of this video, and it's a bit trending on Twitter right now, it's Prince Andrew is next. And honestly, he is next because there's been some very recent developments in this case that is going really well in our favor. I mean, just to knock things off here, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of 5 of 6 counts brought up against her in child trafficking. And most of the key evidence was based off testimonies of women. And that was enough to convince a jury to convict her. And she's now facing 65 years in jail. She's 60 years old, so she's going to be spending the rest of her life in bars. And I saw some people in my last video commenting, like, hopefully she doesn't have the same fate as Jeffrey Epstein, because as we all know, Jeffrey Epstein, quote unquote, killed himself in his jail cell, even though they lost the surveillance footage. And I was actually kind of arguing with someone in my last video, but there was surveillance footage and they accidentally taped over it. And who delivered this news was none other than Maureen Comey, who is ex-FBI director James Comey's daughter. And Maureen Comey was the lead prosecutor in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. So when they announced the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, everybody was like, oh, it's doomed because Maureen Comey is one of the lead prosecutors. It worked out in our favor. It was a huge sigh of relief. You know, they were presented with the flight logs. There was key testimony done by Farmer, who was the only person who was actually named. The other 3 were pseudonyms. And what these women had to endure was obviously re-traumatizing themselves with telling their stories. But the defense was absolutely awful because, as we found out in the R. Kelly case, even the defense was trying to gaslight the key testimonies, being like, are you sure? You sound crazy almost. Like, and, you know, Prince Andrew's kind of using the same tactic as well. He's basically, his lawyers have called Virginia Giuffre, a money-hungry sex bunny is what they called her. And just the idea that they are gaslighting her and making her seem like she is out for his money is so wrong, so disgusting. Prince Andrew, wow, like the scandals around you, especially your lawyers basically dismissing Virginia Giuffre is absolutely insane to me because this woman has been through enough. Virginia Giuffre was also threatened by Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, you can watch the documentary. It's very well known that Virginia Giuffre had to be very brave and come out of the shadows and into the spotlight of the courtroom, and she did a really good job. And Virginia Giuffre is also coming for Prince Andrew, And Prince Andrew, in his effort to basically dismiss this lawsuit, he's done a bunch of different things. First he said, I never received the lawsuit. That was literally his excuse. But before that, before that, he did this disastrous BBC interview where he said, I don't know who she is. I don't sweat, because Virginia Giuffre's account of the night that this event occurred said he was very sweaty as they were dancing together. And then his excuse was, well, that can't be me because I don't sweat. And I mean, this is Prince Andrew sweating right here. I mean, I did a poll and overwhelmingly everybody answered that, yes, he does indeed sweat. And he says this is because of an injury due to war. And he's just like trying to remind everybody, hey, I also fought in the war. You should, respect me. But no respect for you, Prince Andrew. As we all learned from Virginia Giuffre's tweet, is that no one is above the law, whether you're a prince or the president. You're next. The title of my we got Ghislaine Maxwell there, we got Epstein, we got Weinstein, and now we have Prince Andrew sweating, and he should be sweating because there has been some developments in this case, and all his abilities and his efforts to basically dismiss this case. As I said, he said he never received it, and then his second excuse was he's out of jurisdiction. So Virginia Giuffre is an Australian American, and she filed a lawsuit in New York. And because she was Australian, Prince Andrew is saying, you're out of the jurisdiction and you cannot serve me with this lawsuit. However, a recent development that happened just today was this. So the judge says Prince Andrew can't halt lawsuit with domicile claim. A judge has rejected Prince Andrew's attempt to block the progression of a lawsuit by claiming that a woman who says he sexually assaulted her when she was 17 doesn't live in the US. So basically, this is going to court. So Prince Andrew's effort to immediately block the progression of a lawsuit by a woman who says he sexually assaulted her when she was 17 on the grounds that she no longer lives in the US was rejected by a federal judge as oral arguments were set to proceed Monday on the prince's request to dismiss the lawsuit. So there's going to be a hearing whether this lawsuit will be moving forward. And so far, it looks like it's going to be moving forward. And this lawsuit done by Virginia Giuffre basically says she's suing Prince Andrew in a civil lawsuit for emotional distress and battery because Virginia Giuffre alleges that Epstein used her as a sex slave, essentially, and trafficked her around the world to be abused. So she was assaulted multiple times by Epstein and all of his associates. One of them was Prince Andrew in, I think, New Mexico, the Caribbean, New York, as well as London. So basically she was flown around and just like assaulted and trafficked. And she's coming after Prince Andrew for what he did. And so she's going to be using testimonies from 6 other women to convict Prince Andrew. And because of the Ghislaine Maxwell case, and because of the fact that these testimonies used in the Ghislaine Maxwell case convicted Ghislaine, this is pretty much going to be a slam dunk for Virginia Giuffre, because we're talking about how this is a civil lawsuit, and the means to prove a civil lawsuit are actually much lower than a criminal case. So it's not looking good for Prince Andrew, and Prince Andrew is most likely going to be convicted of this. And he's also saying that he reached a 2009 settlement in the Epstein case, but that will come to light on Monday in the hearing. And of course, you'll find an update about that in my YouTube. So make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a live. But basically, this 2009 settlement is between Epstein and his associates, which basically says that he's barred from any sort of lawsuit against him. So Prince Andrew is saying, hey, I reached a settlement in 2009. You can't sue me for this. So that would be interesting. No one knows what the details of this settlement from 2009 is. But of course, once I found out, you can make sure I will be on my YouTube live. So this is the next aspect of the case. Virginia Giuffre basically wanted to prove that, get Prince Andrew to prove that he can not sweat. And something that is kind of interesting about this, and I'm kind of learning more and more about this, but it's called anhidrosis, and it's a clinical disorder, which is a big, big clinical disorder. It's an inability to sweat where certain glands don't function to remove heat and cool the body down. So this condition, anhidrosis, is actually a very problematic and extreme, almost medical condition, because, you look at my dog here, she can't sweat, and reptiles can't sweat, as a lot of people make that joke because they think Prince Andrew is a reptile, but it's a pretty serious condition. And she has to use her mouth and like pant. Like, you can't just say you don't have medical records about your inability to sweat, because that is pretty severe medical condition. And, he basically went on record, his lawyers, apparently in the Buckingham Palace, they have their own lawyers. And so Prince Andrew's lawyers says he has no documents to support the claim he has the inability to sweat. And as I just said, this is a huge medical condition. How do you not have that ability to prove that? Is absolutely insane. And this is the interview from 2019, the BBC, where he basically said it wasn't me. Obviously, this infamous picture where he says it's a deep fake, where he says someone photoshopped his face on this, and there's Ghislaine in the background. And this is the other thing that I just found out, is he has his alibi. His alibi is, I don't know if there's people from the UK in here. I've never heard of this restaurant. It's called Pizza Express in Woking. Yeah, that's right. The town is called Woking. It's a Pizza Express. And okay, I just got to make sure Woking is a town, because I don't know. Pizza Express in Woking. Yeah, so if I'm looking at the maps right here, I'm sorry, I'm learning so much about the UK as I do this case. So this is the royal approved Pizza Hut. And okay. So is Woking a town? It's outside of London. I guess it's a suburb. Very cool. I'm learning a lot. Woking. Cool. You guys got some cool stuff there. Anyway, so Pizza Express is a royal approved little place in Woking. And he says that he was here. That's his alibi. He says, hey, I was in that Virginia Giuffre's encounter. I was actually at Pizza Express in Woking, which is apparently a popular spot in the UK. If you guys can let me know if that is. And that's his defense. But the problem with this is that he actually, again, can't prove any documents or say that he was actually here, which is bizarre, because going back to my intro about Air Miles Andy, Randy Andy, now Handy Andy, we have going to Air Miles Andy. Air Miles Andy is known to face a lot of scandal in the UK because he overspends, even though Pizza Express doesn't seem too expensive, but he's known to have a lot of security around him. So this idea that he cannot prove his alibi that he was at Pizza Express when he was probably surrounded by security is outrageous. I mean, this guy is just so shameless and like the title, his lawyers literally say, and there are no witnesses to confirm he was in Pizza Express on night he's accused of having sex with Virginia Giuffre. Yeah, so he just cannot prove it, even though he's surrounded by all of his people. Yeah, that's funny. So also, what I found kind of interesting about this is Pizza Express got caught in the crossfires, and I kind of feel bad about Pizza Express and Woking. They seem like a good business, number 36 of 118 restaurants in Woking. It's like not too expensive. It's Italian pizza, British. But what they had to do was they had to suspend all of their ratings because of the backlash they're receiving from the Prince Andrew case, because this is what I'm not really understanding is Pizza Express kind of covering for Prince Andrew? Because couldn't Pizza Express in some way provide evidence for Prince Andrew being there? Don't they have surveillance? Don't they have a guest book? I'm not really getting why they are not helping this case either. I mean, I'm sure they could produce some evidence, but they are facing backlash, and people are going to their TripAdvisor and rating them poorly. So if I'm reading this, extremely poor quality food and service. So you can no longer actually rate Pizza Express on TripAdvisor, by the way. If you want to go do that, you can. But it says here, like many people, I attended the now legendary Pizza Express Woking after hearing for its recently acquired royal approval rating. I wish I hadn't bothered, and am now finding the judgment of the royal food critics somewhat questionable and most definitely unreliable. The prince's culinary recommendations are also to be taken with a generously proportioned and luxurious pinch of Korean bamboo roasted amethyst salt. So basically, this person is saying, hey, Prince Andrew is unreliable and he's very questionable. And, you know, we're going to all have to shake our heads in agreement because he's not the best judge of character. I mean, going back to my photo here and my doggy here, because she's my co-host, Gabby. If you're new here, please make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a live. But this Prince Andrew brought these people to his daughter's birthday. So his daughter was turning 18, and then on her 18th birthday, he brought all these predators to her 18th birthday. I mean, even just saying this out loud just kind of makes my head click a bit. Like, your daughter is of age now, 18, and is brought in with these predators. It just doesn't sit right with me. You know, Prince Andrew also brought Kevin Spacey to the Buckingham Palace. Kevin Spacey is a convicted offender as well. I'm trying to search for the right word so I don't get like slapped with an 18 plus warning on my YouTube. But he is convicted as well, and they brought him to the Buckingham Palace. Then we also have Prince Andrew bringing Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein to the Queen's Lodge, and there's a photo of them at the Queen's Lodge. I mean, this guy just doesn't have good judgment, and it's bringing so much shame to the royal family. Like, I'm Canadian in my attic, and I'm just like, oh man, this is not a good look. So again, I'm not gonna read too much about the food, but the toilet smelled like a toilet. Visiting the facilities provides a rather unpleasant and unsavory experience, one that sits uncomfortably and incongruously with the House of Windsor or House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, as they were formerly known as, seal of royal approval. There are sometimes less obvious benefits to only being ninth in line for the throne, one to avoid if at all possible. So unfortunately, Pizza Express is receiving some backlash for their involvement with the Prince Andrew case, which is unfair. And I agree it's unfair that that's the case, but it is what it is. They have since stopped anybody from rating them on their TripAdvisor as well. So problematic. I mean, he can't produce any of the evidence. Prince Andrew's lawyer says he has no documents to support the claim that he has the inability to sweat, and there are no witnesses to confirm he was in Pizza Express on the night he's accused of having sex with Virginia Giuffre. And TripAdvisor has suspended reviews for the Pizza Express restaurant Prince Andrew referenced during his interview about his links to Jeffrey Epstein. So he's facing everybody's kind of facing a ton of backlash in the Prince Andrew Pizza Express scandal. But something that I kind of found out the other day was like, the reason why I think YouTube is very popular and even podcasts when it comes to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal is because the media is being proven to be very corrupt. And I kind of purposely wore my CBC shirt because you guys have the BBC in Britain. We have the CBC, and there's a lot of scandal with the CBC being corrupt. But what I want to talk a little bit about now is how the BBC actually ended up being very corrupt in this scandal as well. And, going back, Ghislaine Maxwell's father was a media tycoon, and she probably has a lot of ties to the media as is. More on that in a bit, but the BBC has recently proven themselves to be quite corrupt in the covering of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Obviously, because they are affiliated probably with the royals, maybe a little bit grandfather with Ghislaine Maxwell, but they're really biased towards showcasing the defense for Ghislaine Maxwell. So much so that this is a couple days old, but I didn't cover it on my channel. But at one time, they had this guy seem as a legal expert. Let's just play it.
Well, let's get more analysis of that verdict now. We can speak to constitutional lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who joins us now. This was a much-watched trial, and after a long set of deliberations...
Okay, I gotta pause it here. Because this is crazy, guys. Like, this is absolutely insane. Oh, man. So, Dershowitz, he was presented as an impartial analyst, and he was asked to comment on the verdict about Ghislaine Maxwell, who is facing 65 years in prison and has been convicted of 5 of 6 child trafficking charges. Dershowitz has a history with Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre actually accused Dershowitz with abuse as well. So Dershowitz is actually involved in this case and is accused of the same things Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted of. And BBC used him as an analyst. So I'm more on that in a bit, but this is absolutely mind-blowing. Let's continue playing this. This is crazy.
Spanning Christmas with a break. Suddenly the jury reached a verdict.
Well, I think the most important thing, particularly for British workers, is that the government was very careful who it used as witnesses. It did not use as a witness the woman who accused Prince Andrew, accused me, accused many other people, because the government didn't believe she was telling the truth. In fact, she, Virginia Giuffre, was mentioned in the trial as somebody who brought young people to Epstein for him to abuse. And so this case does nothing at all to strengthen in any way the case against Prince Andrew. Indeed,
I just want to stop because this guy, okay, this is my issue with this problem right here is this is exactly what I said on my last video that they're going to use against Virginia Giuffre. They're going to use the fact that she actually co-conspired with Epstein to recruit other women for Epstein to abuse. And this is from Caroline's testimony, who, by the way, was using a pseudonym. And I can't bring this up enough, but the defense in this Ghislaine Maxwell trial was actually doxing the testimonies of the pseudonym. So let's just say her name was Caroline. They would actually use her real name. The defense would use her real name and just completely gaslight her. So they're going to play so dirty in the Prince Andrew trial. And this is probably going to be their main argument, was you cannot trust Virginia Giuffre because she recruited other women for Epstein to abuse. It was like a pyramid scheme, abuse pyramid weirdness. But I'm sitting up here and saying Virginia Giuffre, like, that is not a way to dismiss Virginia. I think when it comes to abuse, it's a very complicated matter. And she probably, I'm just speaking maybe I don't think you should be using that against her, because she probably was not thinking right. She was traumatized. She was scared. There's so many reasons why she was doing that. But at the end of the day, she was also a human being. And what she endured was so awful. And just this idea that that's going to be used against her. I mean, human beings make mistakes. And I think we can all just be like humans for a second and realize like that shouldn't be held against Virginia Giuffre. And that's such a terrible, terrible defense. It's really mind blowing. I can't really put it into words either, but just this idea that they'll play so dirty like that is crazy. It
weakens the case against Prince Andrew considerably, because the government was very selective in who it used. It used only witnesses who they believed were credible, and they deliberately didn't use the main witness, the woman who started the whole investigation, Virginia Giuffre, because ultimately they didn't believe she was telling the truth. They didn't believe that a jury would believe her, and they were right in doing so. So it was very smart on the part of the government.
And yet...
Yeah, just to say, in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, Virginia Giuffre didn't take the stand, and 4 other women did, 3 using pseudonyms, and 1 Mrs. Farmer, who was the only one who used her real name. And at the end of the day, the defense really tried to gaslight the situation like this guy is, and said, oh, don't believe women. Do not believe women. You know, they're all lying. They're money hungry. What Prince Andrew literally said that Virginia Giuffre is just after his money. And, you know, I think the point of this is the jury heard all those arguments. The jury heard the defense saying that, and the jury still decided that that is not the case. And they believed the women. And this is just going back to my point where I feel like the media is incredibly corrupt. And I think that's why people like me who are YouTubers actually are out here and there's like 1,500 people watching me. It's because there's more to the story that the media just is not saying. And because it's so biased. And this is one example of like how it's so biased. You have this guy presented as a legal analyst who is facing the same convictions as Ghislaine Maxwell is, completely dismissing the testimonies of these 4 women and saying you can't trust them. This is just so mind-blowing.
The version, the image that was portrayed of Ghislaine Maxwell as a sophisticated predator is the one that the jury have agreed with.
Well, the jury agreed that she helped Jeffrey Epstein in his activities. And the question then is whether or not she will be sentenced as if she were Jeffrey Epstein, or sentenced as if she were simply somebody who facilitated and helped. And the other question is, who else will be charged? Because the testimony introduced evidence that other people were guilty and involved.
Wow. So that is crazy. Again, the BBC did release a statement on interview with Alan Dershowitz. Last night's interview with Alan Dershowitz after the Ghislaine Maxwell verdict did not meet the BBC's editorial standards, as Mr. Dershowitz was not a suitable person to interview as an impartial analyst, and we did not make the relevant background clear to our audience. We will look into how this happened. So a lot of people basically were calling them out that this is absolutely awful because, I mean, let's be honest, it is. And they apologize. But then what do? They do it again. And this is where it's so weird because BBC comes under fire again. They didn't learn. Okay, one of the ways that I learn how to, be a good person is the best way to say you're sorry is to not make the same mistake. And they made the same mistake again. BBC actually came under fire for giving Ghislaine Maxwell's brother a primetime slot on Radio 4 to attack guilty verdicts and cast his sister as a victim. So this happened yesterday while I was doing my Prince Andrew blast video. I put Prince Andrew on blast and I completely missed the story. But this happened yesterday, and basically the BBC has their primetime news channel is called Radio 4. I'm sorry if there's people from the UK. I'm a Canadian. I'm learning a lot about UK culture. Radio 4 is by BBC. and it's their main news. And I actually listened to the podcast and I took a bunch of captures of it, but it was so weird. The entire let me just switch because my dog is really cute. The entire show was like this weird, like they were building up to the main interview where it was like the program started with the journalist being like, yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell is a victim. And then as you're listening to the show, just gets worse and worse. And it's like, hey, Ian Maxwell, is Ghislaine a victim? Yeah, the women are lying and they're after his money. And it was just like, that was like the thing to whet your palate. And then like another half hour, they would like release some more of the interview. And then finally the big interview happened. And it was all just like at the primetime news spot, right at the end of the radio show. It was this like total sympathy. Ghislaine Maxwell is a victim. And this is why you cannot trust the media, because the BBC is doing this behavior, this disgusting behavior where they're painting out Ghislaine Maxwell to be a victim, and they're painting out Ghislaine Maxwell to be the fall guy for Epstein. So basically the defense is saying you can't trust these women, you can't listen to these women, and moreover that Ghislaine Maxwell is the punching bag because you can't convict Epstein. So she is the next in line and everybody's taking out their anger on her. And I mean, you got to listen to this interview and we're going to listen to it together. I'm surprised they didn't take it down, but wow, let's play it.
In due course for that and the 4 other charges of which she was found guilty in New York. One of the 4 victims who testified against her did so under her real name, Annie Farmer, and she spoke afterwards to ABC's Good Morning America.
It's a tremendous relief to be here. I wasn't sure that this day would ever come, and I just feel so grateful that the jury believed us and sent a strong message that perpetrators of sexual abuse and exploitation will be held accountable no matter how much power and privilege that they have.
The barrister Charlotte Proudman says the verdicts are already giving other women more confidence in legal cases that they are considering. We'll hear from her in a moment. But first to the appeal that Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers say is already being prepared. I asked her brother Ian, who attended the trial, what the grounds for that would be.
This is essentially going to be on legal grounds, both in terms of pre-trial process and indeed the trial process itself.
The pre-trial process, I remember you talking to us before and you said how you thought the conditions your sister was being held in amounted to torture, but she appeared engaged, animated, able to converse with her siblings, with her lawyers, study everything very carefully.
For me,
Yeah, so this is what the defense is using. They're saying that Ghislaine Maxwell, as she was awaiting trial, she was put in such foul and awful prisoner-like conditions. I mean, there's that one photo of her with the black eye, and I'll put it up as we're listening to this BBC Radio 4 mess. This interview is a mess. I'm sorry. You're literally defending a convicted predator on your radio station that is broadcasted to your public. I think your public deserves better than that. This is ridiculous. I mean, this radio I'm playing is prime time. Like, so their defense is basically saying that she didn't have a fair trial because she was put into prisoner-like conditions. I think she was put into the Brooklyn jail, which, by the way, she still is in the Brooklyn jail, and she's probably put in a special victims unit because of the fact that she's a convicted predator. And in the Brooklyn jail, you actually will get murdered by other inmates if you are a convicted predator who does things to children, which she does. So the fact that they're sympathizing with her is remarkable. And let's continue with the Ian Maxwell's BBC Radio 4 interview.
Conditions in which she's been held, notwithstanding that she appeared superficially to be able to pay attention and talk to us or to her lawyers, the fact is that over 18 months of the kind of conditions that she's had to endure have seriously impacted her ability to participate meaningfully in her defense pre-trial and during the trial itself.
But that trial saw 4 women give deeply disturbing testimony against your sister, and they were believed by the jurors. Testimony like that of Jane, who said she was 14 when she was approached at a summer camp by your sister and Jeffrey Epstein, that she was abused every other week for the next 2 years. Carolyn, who said she was paid by your sister to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein hundreds of times between the ages of 14 and 18. Similar accounts from a woman who used the pseudonym Kate, and also from Annie Farmer. As you heard this testimony, what did you think?
They were heart-rending testimonies, but notwithstanding the testimony, my own view is that Ghislaine had nothing to do with it. These were Epstein's crimes, and he's not here to pay that price, and she's being made to pay the price that he should have paid.
And yet these accusers, one after another, put forward her role in their abuse, that she was the one who befriended them. She was the one who showed them what to do. She was one who said, I thought it would be fun for you to take Jeffrey his tea in this outfit, which was a schoolgirl outfit. Now, she didn't take the stand herself. The strategy seemed to be to undermine and belittle these women who were deeply distressed often as they were putting forward these accounts.
Well, we're not going to replay the trial right now, but clearly there were enormous discrepancies between the testimony that was given at court and the testimony that was given by the accusers to the FBI and to the prosecuting authorities, which remain very hard to explain.
But what
I just want to say thank you to the Snooper Chat for Jeannie M. And this is the BBC Radio 4 interview. And basically, it's showing Ian Maxwell complain about how the testimonies were different. But also, I just want to point out that these testimonies, there's 6 women who are going to testify against Prince Andrew, and the bar for convincing a jury, I guess, the bar for conviction for Prince Andrew is going to be lower than in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. So, because it is a civil lawsuit, so these testimonies that Virginia Giuffre is going to present will most likely convict Prince Andrew.
did you think as you heard those accounts?
Well, as I said to you, you couldn't but be moved by them, but nonetheless, my sister is entitled to a defense. I don't have anything against the jury. The issue is that the process that led to that, the pre-trial denial of so many motions and all other kinds of things that went on during the trial are grounds, strong grounds for an appeal on which I think Ghislaine will be vindicated.
But let's go back to what was actually said in the trial and the accounts that the jury believed, the accounts that corroborated one after another from these 4 women. One of them saying that your sister had given her a topless massage when she was 16. Another one saying that your sister told her she had a great body for Epstein and his friends before touching her breasts. Another one saying that your sister was the one who showed her how Jeffrey Epstein liked to be massaged. Are you saying to us that all of these women are lying?
No, I'm not saying that they are lying. It may well be that they were victims of Jeffrey Epstein, but I do not accept that they were victims of Ghislaine. And that's my position, and that's also her position.
Which would have to mean that they were lying when they said that she was the one who introduced them to Epstein, that she was part of the procurement of them for Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, your sister was an integral part of Jeffrey Epstein's life, wasn't she? She was running his home. She was at his side. We saw the photographs during the trial of all the time they spent together, all the places they went together, how intertwined their lives were. If what you're saying is correct, it would mean that she was at his side and had no idea what was going on.
That's the impression that the prosecution wanted to give you. I think there was something like 100 photographs out of 37,000. None of them were dated. Most of those looked to me from about 1992, 93. It's designed to paint a picture. And of course, the prosecution didn't put into evidence the prior interviews that they had with these accusers prior to trial, which showed a completely different case. Memory is faulty. So in my view, the trial that has occurred was not a fair trial from Ghislaine's perspective. And that is why she's going to appeal, and I think she'll be successful.
Well, Charlotte Proudman specialises in cases involving abuse and violence against women and girls, and she spoke to us about the impact of the case and about...
Yeah, so that was during their primetime spot, and there was a big backlash. This was actually yesterday there was a huge
Well,
backlash against that because they're obviously painting out, Ghislaine Maxwell as a victim. And they said undated photos. And I just want to point out something since we're on the topic of Prince Andrew, but this was a huge scandal when it came to Prince Andrew because he actually was seen with Epstein walking Central Park after Epstein spent 13 months in jail for predatory behavior with young girls. And he got a sweetheart deal and he only spent 13 months in jail. He comes out of jail. Prince Andrew flies down to Central Park to see him. And Prince Andrew's defense in this was that he was telling Epstein that we cannot be friends anymore. I'm not buying it. In fact, I kind of would like to do some more research into Prince Andrew's stay during this time and see if potentially he was actually using Epstein's services during this time. And I think that's what a lot of people are thinking. And hopefully that comes to light too, so that we can actually see that there's more victims when it comes to Prince Andrew, because I'm just not buying his story that he met up with Epstein after his serving in jail and for 13 months. And he was just telling them we can't be friends anymore. I'm not buying that. Something else that on the topic of really biased media attention, this is new news too. And this is brand new information. A new unearthed interview reveals how Ghislaine Maxwell helped kill Vanity Fair expose. So there's a lot of conspiracies. And I see people in the chat saying it's important to discuss conspiracies. And I think it is, because sometimes the conspiracies come to be true. This was a conspiracy that the media was being controlled by certain people in power so that the public couldn't see what was actually going on. And this is a prime example of that. There's evidence of a testimony of Ghislaine Maxwell saying to Vanity Fair that you cannot write this expose on her sex crimes. She squashed this article. She said, you cannot write this article about my sex crimes. Not at all, is what she said. So she is controlling the media. I just played 2 clips by the BBC where they're painting Ghislaine Maxwell out to be a victim. You cannot tell me that they're not controlling the media. I know I sound crazy, but I think people are just coming on to the fact that this is actually happening. Ghislaine Maxwell had a dad who is a very powerful figure in the media. She's using her power to control the narrative. She squashed this Vanity Fair article about her previous sex crimes nearly 20 years ago to help bury an expose of her sex crimes while claiming Jeffrey Epstein was generous and very, very good to his accusers, according to a newly released transcript of a rare interview. Maxwell, now 60, did not testify during her sex trafficking trial, in which her legal team insisted she was innocent scapegoat for the bad behavior of Epstein, her late ex and longtime companion. But she did speak out in 2002 in a fiery interview that, like the planned expose, never ran in Vanity Fair. Instead, the magazine published a flattering puff piece titled "The Talented Mr. Epstein." So people want to talk about how these are conspiracies. No. No, they were going to run about the sex crimes of Mr. Epstein, and then Ghislaine Maxwell basically got them to write this about how there's the talented Mr. Epstein, March 2003. This is obviously before it was come to light that he is a convicted predator, but this is what I'm talking about. The media is being controlled, and we just played 2 BBC clips where the media is controlling the narrative, and it's absolutely mind-boggling and very concerning. Reporter Vicky Ward said it was her eternal regret that the magazine did not run the accusations by Maria Farmer and her sister Annie, whose testimony was key in Maxwell's conviction this week. So that conspiracy ended up being true. This is another conspiracy that is running around the internet about how Ghislaine Maxwell is controlling the media. This is another example. Laureen Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow, who actually owns The Atlantic. I didn't know this, but she's seen with Ghislaine Maxwell here hanging out. It looks like they're reading paper. I wonder what they're reading. Well, after they hung out, look what came out. The Great Fake Child Sex Trafficking Epidemic. So this is something that is kind of interesting because I've seen a lot of videos of people who are QAnon conspiracists, and I'm sure many of my followers are familiar with Q and that sort of movement. But one of the big movements is that there's this cabal of child traffickers that are operating, and it's kind of blown out as they're just like crazy Q people. And honestly, now that I'm seeing this actually come to light, where the media is being controlled, all of this is being swept under the rug, everybody's being gaslit and made to feel like child trafficking isn't a thing, but it turns out in this case, it ended up being a thing. Wow. So crazy, right? Like the media is being controlled. Wow. So there's more. So if you guys are familiar with Reddit, this is another very concerning thing. One of the CEOs of Reddit, Ellen K. Powell, actually stepped down from her position. And she wrote this. She writes about Ghislaine Maxwell. She was at the Kleiner holiday party in 2001, but I had no desire to meet her, much less have a photo taken with her. We knew about her supplying underage girls for sex, but I guess that was fine with the cool people who managed the tightly controlled guest list. So Ellen Powell is known to actually censor Reddit because Reddit, this is from 2020. This was only a year ago, but Reddit is known to be highly, it's like the internet. It's like the wild, wild west. You can write whatever. Ellen Powell actually has censored a lot of Reddit. A lot of what Reddit used to be isn't now because of Ellen Powell as CEO. And it's very weird that in this tweet, she was complicit to Ghislaine Maxwell's accusations. And it's very disturbing that she just acts like everything's fine. And Reddit is actually a huge source on the internet for news and information. And Ellen Powell is potentially censoring it. And this is another conspiracy as well, that this account on Reddit, Maxwell Hill, is actually run by Ghislaine Maxwell, because you can see in the last time they posted was 2 years ago after Ghislaine Maxwell was indicted in New Hampshire. So this is one of the most powerful accounts on Reddit because, as you know, Reddit is a crowdsourced platform, and this is one of the most popular and powerful accounts on Reddit. It's mostly on world news. So in some ways, Ghislaine Maxwell was actually controlling the news on the internet's biggest news site. You know, we talked about the BBC, we talked about the Atlantic. Now we're talking about Reddit. And just switching gears a bit here, this is also new, but I'm going to read your chats right now. I think it's a good time. Sarah writes, wasn't called Randy Andy for nothing. That is true. So this is a new article, and I'm trying to keep the information fresh, and I'm trying to breeze over some of the information that is from a year ago with the Ellen Powell thing. But I did actually listen to a podcast where people are bringing up the CEO of Reddit as an example. So I just thought I would, but this is new. People are kind of wondering what is going to happen to co-conspirators of Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, because there's at least 4 other women that are involved in the Epstein child trafficking case. We have Sarah Kellen. So Sarah Kellen is, if there was one person mentioned almost as much as Maxwell and Epstein during the trial, it was Sarah Kellen. She was their personal assistant and has been dubbed Epstein's lieutenant for allegedly recruiting and booking girls for massages. So Carolyn, one of the victims, said that for the first year or two, Maxwell called to her schedule massages for Epstein, which began when she was 14. After that, it was Miss Kellen who called her. Sarah Ransom, also another victim, told the New York Times that it was Ghislaine and Sarah Kellen that showed me how to please Jeffrey. So this woman is also involved in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. And, you know, on the discussion of
in due course for that and the four other charges of which.
Sorry about that. You're next right here. I mean, this trial isn't over because there's actually 4 other women that are going to be brought into the spotlight too. This is Adriana Ross, and the article is so mean to her. They write, now 38, she is an accountant and lives with her second husband in a rundown $400,000 home, which is like $400,000 is a lot of money, Daily Mail. But she was also she worked for Epstein until his first arrest in 2007. During a civil deposition in 2010, she was asked, has Prince Andrew ever been involved with underage minor females to your knowledge? Have you ever met him? Have you flown on Epstein's plane with Andrew? She declined to answer. So sometimes no answer is an answer. And I think she has the dirt on Prince Andrew. And maybe if she spilled that dirt on Prince Andrew, she wouldn't be living in a $400,000 home. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but people are kind of just like in shock. Like, you were Epstein's right hand man and you're left kind of not rich is crazy. So she allegedly helped organize Epstein's massages. So obviously, as you know, Epstein would bring out women over, especially from Mar-a-Lago. Virginia Giuffre was actually working at Mar-a-Lago, and that's how she was introduced to Epstein. Mar-a-Lago is Donald Trump's resort. I think it is. I think it's a resort. And she was working there as like an attendant, and she was reading a massage book. And then that's when Epstein offered Virginia Giuffre a job. And then ever since then, she's been trafficked around the world. And one of her clients was Prince Andrew. Very, very shocking. Donald Trump, by the way, has, from all accounts, had nothing to do with it. Donald Trump, actually, with all the pictures of Donald Trump, was actually before Epstein was convicted. And then Donald Trump also banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago after he was flirtatious with one of his staff. So just want to clear that because people get confused. Nadia Marcinkova. So according to police documents from the 2005 inquiry in Palm Beach, Epstein once bragged she was his sex slave. He had bought her from her family in the former Yugoslavia when she was 15. So Epstein brought her over from Yugoslavia when she was just 15 years old. Miss Marcinkova is alleged to have taken part in sexual encounters with underage girls. She visited him 67 times in prison while he was serving 13 months in jail in 2008 for having sex with girls. She is now 36 and is a pilot who goes by the name Global Girl, offering flying lessons. Her lawyers say she was a victim and not an abuser or a recruiter. Well, that's kind of problematic because we know that Virginia Giuffre is, a victim, but she was also used to recruit other women, because how Epstein worked was that he, as I mentioned, the massage tables, right? One of the key pieces of evidence in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial was them bringing out the massage tables, which, I mean, was a very dramatic moment. Also, a dramatic moment in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial was when Ghislaine actually started drawing the sketcher, like sketching the sketch artist. But we do know that from the Ghislaine Maxwell trial was that Jeffrey Epstein used to make the other women who worked with was abusing them, was recruit other women. So the abused women, it was like a pyramid scheme where these abused women would recruit other women. And Caroline, who is a pseudonym in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, actually threw Virginia Giuffre under the bus. And then Prince Andrew is most likely in his defense going to be using the fact that Virginia Giuffre, recruited other victims for Epstein in his defense, which is absolutely not a defense. I'll say that again, and I'll keep saying that. But it's interesting that she's basically saying her lawyers say she was a victim and not an abuser or a recruiter. So why doesn't she step forward? So Leslie Groff is the last one that they've named. She is said to have been Epstein's executive assistant for 20 years and boasted in an interview in 2005 that she had such a tight bond with him that, quote, I know what he is thinking, end quote. Epstein's victims have described her as one of his schedulers based at his 55 million, okay, it's 110 million New York home, probably more than that. I don't know how pounds work. Sorry. One, Jennifer Arrows claims she was 14 when Epstein began abusing and assaulting her, and that Miss Groff was the chief scheduler of her massages. So Jennifer Arrows, I don't know who that is, to be honest. Let me just Google that real fast. Sorry. Jennifer. Okay, so this is Epstein accusers. There's so many of them, it's hard to keep track. I've definitely read about her. Yeah, I read about her. So her name's Jennifer. I wonder why she didn't go on trial. But this is someone that is also accusing Epstein of abuse. So Miss Groff, now 55, lives in a $4 million house in Connecticut with her husband and children. Her lawyer said she had been under investigation by prosecutors for the last 2 years, but has been told they have no plans to charge her. Interesting. So Leslie Groff sounds like she's been paid off. Honestly. And all the VIPs were involved. A lot of the small fry named here. What about their famous rich individuals? And that's the thing. That's the part that's kind of confusing about this case was, why is it that we're going after Ghislaine Maxwell? Why aren't we going after, Bill Clinton for he flew on the Lolita Express. He was visited by Epstein multiple times. I mean, why aren't we going after Bill Clinton? Why are we going after the small fry women? Why, Prince Andrew, thank God we're going after him, but can we not go after Bill Clinton too, So I hope something more comes out of this and we're not just going to go to the small fries, because that's a really good point. And, there's this Prince Andrew is just the tip of the iceberg, and same with Ghislaine. So also the trial, the hearing will be on Monday. Make sure you subscribe, ring the bell so you never miss a live, because I'm going to be here talking about the trial all day and night. So this is what I'm going to be working on. And I just want to give an update. This is new information. Prince Andrew's accuser, Virginia Giuffre, is set to give victim impact statement at a sentencing of Ghislaine Maxwell. So basically the defense is saying that, and this is Ghislaine Maxwell's defense too, was Epstein. She was caught up in the tides of Epstein and that she's a victim because she just kept bad company, which was Epstein. And, that's what this title says too. It says, insiders claim Buckingham Palace sleeped into crisis. So, I mean, I don't think anybody sleepwalked into crisis. I think this was kind of a concerted effort by Prince Andrew to be a part of this. And I think Prince Andrew knew what he was doing. And speaking of Prince Andrew's defenses, he's also going to say that, I mean, first he said, I don't know who Virginia Giuffre is. Then he says, she got it wrong. I don't sweat. And then he says, I'm served with court documents and I've never received them. And then he goes, Virginia Giuffre was 17 at the time. So he's basically admitting to sleeping with her. And his defense becomes, she was 17 at the time. So he goes through all these lies over years and years and years. And poor Virginia Giuffre had to keep fighting just for him to finally admit it. And then there was emails linked to the BBC that showed that Prince Andrew was asking Ghislaine Maxwell about Virginia Giuffre. So this is crazy that he was lying so hard, but in the background, he was asking Ghislaine Maxwell to talk about Virginia Giuffre. So this guy went on the BBC, again, throwing the BBC under the bus, But basically, they broadcasted that he has no idea who Virginia Giuffre is. And that ended up being a complete lie. And he lied to the BBC. So, Air Miles Andy, Randy Andy, now Handy Andy. So Virginia Giuffre is suing for battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. So she's gonna win it. I'm fully confident she's gonna win it because, as I said, the burden of proof is much lower for civil lawsuits, and as we've all learned from the criminal case, that women's testimonies are enough. And this is a new update too, but the lawyers of Prince Andrew's assault accuser, Virginia Giuffre, is going to bring about 6 key witnesses. So 6 people are going to stand with Virginia Giuffre, and she is going to basically win this case. And so one of the peoples I think that she's going to bring about. And that's going to conclude my video. I'm getting a bit tired. I'm going to read your chats. Who is handling Epstein's estate? Exactly, Kiermoth. And this is my thing about that. I think Epstein's estate should go to the victims. I think all the money should go to the victims. And I have no idea who's handling the estate. I also think Ghislaine Maxwell needs to pay for her imprisonment, because right now the public is, and that's just totally wrong. So he says she is not a USA citizen, Sarah writes. So that is interesting. He says, yeah, because she is an Australian citizen, which I'm confused about because I thought she was an Australian American citizen, but I think she somehow served him the papers from Australia. And that's why he's saying, because she now lives in Australia, it's out of her jurisdiction. And that's the reason why. So I think she has dual citizenship, but she currently resides in Australia. And because she's serving the papers from Australia, he says it's out of his jurisdiction and out of the jurisdiction, and the case should be thrown out. But the judge, going back to my very first article, it was the judge actually disagrees with that, and the case will move forward. I love reading your chats. Absolutely. Money and status of oneself can and does dictate your outcome with horrendous crimes. Thank you, Deborah Phipps, for that. Kiermoth writes, estate is kind of a general term and not particular houses. Just wondering who's handling the stuff he owns. Exactly. So estate will also include his money, obviously, and his valuables and everything he owns. And, I really want that going to all the victims. Okay, Giuffre. Okay, Tanya writes, please say Virginia's name right. It's kind of annoying. Virginia Giuffre. I say Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre. And the reason why I say Virginia Giuffre is because that's how I was watching the news reports say it. So Sam, I think she was born here. Australia, nice. Julia Rock writes, he is grasping at straws. What an embarrassment. I agree. It's so embarrassing. It's insulting and disgraceful to the royal family. And, I read an article today about Meghan Markle and how she got out of it. And, I'm going to have to agree. I mean, the pressures the royal family has to face and how they're behaving with women is astounding to me, especially seeing how Prince Andrew acts and trying to dismiss this case. It kind of speaks to bigger problems and really reflects badly on the royal family. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for coming here. I try to keep my streams to under an hour. I've been talking for an hour and 22 minutes, so that's crazy. Thank you so much, guys, for hanging out with me and my dog, Gabby. I'm going to be covering this case nonstop because I think it is important to talk about this case. As we pointed out, the media corruption in this case is astounding. So thank you so much for joining me and Gabby. And I hope everybody has a very happy and safe New Year's. And I love you guys all. Thank you so much.